Why does India still depend on an American engine when history has shown that the United States can change the rules at any time? After India's 1998 nuclear tests, sanctions delayed several critical defense technologies. Even today, many defense deals involving the U.S. come with export controls, licensing conditions, and long commercial negotiations. Now, India's biggest indigenous fighter programs, the Tejas Mk2 and the AMCA, have run into a major obstacle. Reports suggest that during commercial negotiations, GE Aerospace quoted a price for the F414 engine that is nearly 3 times higher than the initial estimates. On top of that, there are reports of additional demands for hundreds of millions of dollars to establish local manufacturing. This has triggered one big question across India. Has India fallen into the F414 trap? And if the answer is yes, can India simply replace the American engine with a French, British, or even an indigenous one? Or is it already too late? Welcome to Indosphere Media. What happened? Let's first understand the issue. A few years ago, India selected the GE F414-6 engine to power the upcoming Tejas Mk2 fighter and the first version of the AMCA, India's fifth-generation stealth fighter. The decision wasn't random. The F414 is one of the world's most reliable fighter engines. It powers aircraft like the F/A-18 Super Hornet and the Gripen E. The engine produces around 98 kilonewtons of thrust, has an excellent reliability record, and offers advanced FADEC digital engine control. Because of these advantages, India selected it as the power plant for its next generation of indigenous fighters. Initially, the engine was expected to cost around 70 to 80 crore per unit. However, according to recent reports, GE's commercial offer reportedly pushed the price to well over 200 crore per engine, along with an additional investment requirement of more than $800 million for manufacturing infrastructure in India. Although the broad technology transfer framework had already been discussed, the commercial negotiations became the major sticking point. Why can't India just change the engine? Many people are asking. If America is demanding so much money, why doesn't India simply buy a French or British engine? The answer is simple. Because a fighter aircraft isn't like a car, you cannot simply remove one engine and bolt another one into place. Every fighter jet is designed around its engine from the very beginning. The engine determines air intake design, aircraft balance, center of gravity, fuel system, cooling system, software, flight control laws, stealth shaping, internal weapons bay, electrical power generation. The entire aircraft depends on it. Changing the engine means redesigning almost everything. Why this is even more difficult for AMCA? For the AMCA, the challenge becomes even greater. The aircraft's stealth design has already been frozen around the dimensions of the GE F414. Even a small change in engine size changes the air intake geometry, which affects radar reflections. It affects airflow. It affects stealth performance. It affects aircraft stability. And once you modify the aircraft, you must start years of testing again, thousands of flight test hours, hundreds of redesigns, fresh certification, billions of rupees. Instead of saving time, India could lose another 5 to 7 years. What about Safran? France's Safran is currently India's biggest alternative. Safran has proposed co-developing a completely new engine with Dr. Research and Development Organization. The goal is an engine producing around 120 kilonewtons of thrust. Unlike previous agreements, this proposal reportedly includes far greater Indian participation in design and intellectual property that is extremely attractive. But there's one problem. This engine does not exist yet. Developing a modern fighter engine takes years, sometimes more than a decade. So while Safran could become India's long-term solution, it cannot immediately power the first Tejas Mk2 or AMCA prototypes. What about Rolls-Royce? Rolls-Royce has also offered to jointly develop a next-generation engine with India. Their proposal reportedly includes extensive technology sharing and Indian participation. Again, excellent for the future, but not something that can replace the F414 tomorrow morning. Can Kaveri save India? Whenever people discuss indigenous engines, one name always appears: Kaveri. India started developing the Kaveri engine almost 40 years ago. The dream was simple: power the Tejas using an Indian engine. Unfortunately, the engine could not produce enough thrust. It also struggled with weight and reliability targets. Eventually, Tejas switched to the American GE F414 engine. But the Kaveri story didn't end there. Today, the engine has evolved into a dry version suitable for unmanned combat aircraft like Gadak. Meanwhile, Dr. Rao's organization, the DRDO, continues working on an afterburning version for future fighters. The knowledge gained from Kaveri has helped India master advanced technologies such as single-crystal turbine blades and high-temperature metallurgy. Although Kaveri cannot replace the F414 today, it remains one of India's most important long-term strategic investments. Why are fighter engines so difficult? Many people underestimate fighter engines. In reality, a fighter engine is among the most complex machines ever built. The turbine blades operate in temperatures approaching 2000 degrees Celsius. That's hotter than the melting point of the metal itself. Special cooling channels constantly push air through microscopic holes drilled using laser precision. The compressor spins at tens of thousands of revolutions every minute. The bearings experience enormous loads. The engine must survive violent maneuvers up to 9G. It must perform perfectly from sea level to nearly 20 kilometers altitude. And if the engine fails, the aircraft could be lost. That's why only a handful of countries have mastered advanced fighter engine technology. Has India become too dependent on the United States? This question is becoming increasingly important. Today, India operates numerous American defense platforms: Apache helicopters, Chinooks, P-8I maritime aircraft, C-17 Globemasters, C-130J transport aircraft, MH-60R helicopters, MQ-9B drones, M777 howitzers. And now, future fighter aircraft also depend on American engines. Some analysts argue that this creates strategic vulnerability because commercial negotiations, export controls, or policy changes could affect long-term defense planning. Others argue that the United States remains one of India's most important strategic partners and that difficult commercial negotiations do not necessarily mean future cooperation will fail. Regardless of which view one takes, reducing dependence through indigenous capability remains a long-term Indian objective. So, what are India's options? Realistically, India has only 3 choices. Option 1, negotiate harder with General Electric, secure better commercial terms, keep Tejas Mk2 and AMCA on schedule. Option 2, accelerate joint engine development with Safran or Rolls-Royce for future AMCA variants. Option 3, invest massively in indigenous engine technology so that future Indian fighters never depend entirely on foreign suppliers. None of these options is easy, but delaying decisions could cost the Indian Air Force valuable time as squadron numbers remain under pressure. Conclusion: whether GE's reported price demands are simply tough commercial negotiations or an example of supplier leverage, one thing is clear. India's dependence on foreign fighter engines has once again become a strategic challenge. The F414 remains one of the world's best engines. Replacing it today would delay India's fighter programs by years. That is exactly why the current negotiations matter so much. For now, India may have little choice but to negotiate. But in the long run, the real solution is clear. India needs an indigenous world-class fighter engine, backed by Indian intellectual property, Indian manufacturing, and Indian control. Because true strategic autonomy doesn't begin with building a fighter aircraft, it begins with building the engine that powers it. If you enjoyed this deep analysis, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Indosphere Media.